welcome back to another edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. I'm Raffi, as always, joined by Theodore and Davian. Boys, we had a chaotic rivalry weekend in college football. Theodore, you may or may not have been involved in one of those crazy games, so I'll give you the opportunity in a moment to speak about that game as I ask you guys, as always, how you guys are doing. What a weekend. We're going to get into it. We're going to give our rankings. We're going to give our predictions, and we're going to see what the College Football Playoff Committee is going to do once everything is all settled and all the records are figured out at the end of Saturday. But before we get into all the College Football Playoff talk and all the college football predictions for championship weekend, as always, boys, how are you guys?
All right. This past week has been filled with highs and lows. Highs, got to meet Theodore finally in person.
Yeah.
We had a Benchwarmers reunion. You can check out the TikTok. We flicked up. It was amazing. We went to I don't even know what was the tournament called, but we got to see UConn versus Texas college basketball, which we will be getting to later on in the season. It was just amazing to great game, great vibes, just meeting Theodore, whatnot. We had some great New York City pizza. The lows are being a Patriots fan. I'm currently wearing my glasses to cover my tears. I can't believe we lost to Tommy DeVito. Not much to say beyond that. Was pretty hyped to see Bama and Michigan win though. And Raffi, before we jump to Theodore, Raffi, how have you been?
I've been fine. I mean, we're getting to the point that we're all experiencing. We're almost at finals week. The end is almost near, and then we get to go on winter break. So I am definitely looking forward to that. And as listeners of the podcast know, I do have Michigan winning the national championship this year. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little upset that they beat Ohio State this past weekend. I wanted Ohio State to win. I was repping the Ohio State sweatshirt, and unfortunately Michigan won the game, and Ryan Day should be fired. Like, seriously, you can't go 1-3 versus Michigan in your career so far and not get fired. Like, that's blasphemy. You should be fired from the state of Ohio, which honestly might not be a bad thing, but regardless, you get my point. It's just a disgrace to lose 3 of the last 4 to the University of Michigan after dominating them for so long. Unacceptable. Anyways, I'm still doing well. Connor Bedard is great, so whenever I'm upset, I just watch Connor Bedard highlights, and that's always put me in a better mood, just like how you guys can just turn on any Rangers game, and I'm sure you guys will be enjoying those games to their entirety, except for tonight, because I think that they got blown out 5-2 to the Sabres as we record this podcast on Monday night, the 27th. Theodore, I will give you your spotlight now. I'm sure you're going to want to talk about the Washington State game, because that was the big one you were involved in and we're watching.
That is what.
Or was it Illinois versus Northwestern, also 2:30?
Yes, it
was. Versus Maryland.
Yeah. No, I had to watch Tommy DeVito's former school. So yeah, they did. All jokes aside, Tommy DeVito is a great story for the New York Giants. And do I kind of want the team to tank? Yes. But am I really happy to see us winning games, especially when they're against
we lost the Tank Bowl.
Yeah. Okay, but obviously
Marvin Harrison is ours, baby.
The reason that I'm smiling is not because of the New York Giants. It is because we just witnessed one of the most iconic moments in college football history, one of the greatest moments in Iron Bowl history, and again, yet another reason why the Iron Bowl is the greatest rivalry in college football. 4th and 31. Just what a play. I mean, when I tell you that I jumped out of the couch, I leapt. And I was like jumping up and around like a kangaroo, like screaming, yelling, like stuff was thrown. Like the vibe around there was just so depressed. And then I just remember saying right before that snap, we need a miracle.
And then Theodore did not remember anything else that happened that night.
Yeah. Davian knows how it went. I mean, words cannot describe what that play meant, you know? First of all, for me just watching as a fan, but then also just for the college football season as a whole, like, completely reshapes what is at stake this weekend and gives us so many great storylines. I'm just so excited to watch everything unfold, which we'll get to in this podcast.
This is literally deja vu from 2 years ago where Auburn had the game versus Alabama and they blew it and lost in overtime to put Alabama away. That year, I think Alabama lost to Georgia at some point, and Georgia won the national championship because they won
That was
back-to-back
the year.
years.
So that was 2021.
Or was that the year they won versus Ohio State?
We went on to beat Georgia in the SEC championship. And that is the last time that Georgia has lost. They've won 29 straight games since then. Completely unbeaten since we beat them in that 2021 championship. And we're looking to change that this week.
Yeah, and obviously Alabama is a team that I always feel is similar in the Tom Brady echelon as Davian. Certainly smirks as I go through my entire PTSD in my mind right now. Oof. Anywho, Alabama's just one of those teams where you see what happens, and it's like, okay, Auburn, you're punting the ball back. Auburn muffs the punt. You're like, okay, well, we all know how this game's ending then.
Yeah.
And even when the botch snap, Milroe recovers the ball 30 yards back, and it's 4th and 31. You just, like, in the back of your mind, you're just like, how is Alabama just going to pull this out of their bum and win this game? And sure enough, in Alabama fashion, Nick Saban, they just find a way in incredible fashion. I mean, it's unacceptable for Auburn to allow that touchdown. I don't even know.
You can't lose like that.
You absolutely
How's it
can't.
one-on-one? On 4th and 31, how are you having a one-on-one? Like, that does not make any sense. Where was the safety of that?
Here is where they made their mistake. They put 9 guys in coverage. Like, I'm sorry, but if you're only going to rush 2 against a guy like Jalen Milroe, you're going to be forced to pay. I mean, these Alabama receivers are just too good to stay covered forever, you know? Really, I thought that
I would rush nobody. It's 4th and 31. Don't rush anybody.
Okay. Me being the experienced past quarterback coach, soon to be water boy, soon to be Mike McDaniel. I'm not. But anyways, I'll pretend that I am right here. You got to rush 3 or 4. I think if you have too many players in the backfield, then people get confused about who's covering who, and I think a player can slip out of any coverage and just like find themselves open like we saw with Auburn play. So although it's good to have as many people in the backfield, it also can just cause some chaos too if you're the defense and you're trying to figure out, okay, who am I covering, whose assignment is who, etc. So
they would have forced Milroe to throw the ball before he wanted to.
He had like 3 years to throw that ball.
Yeah.
Like,
and the thing is, Milroe, and I love him, he's not the smartest quarterback, you know? And we've seen him make a lot of not great decisions when he's pressured. Like, I mean, you guys saw him throw the ball 4 yards in front of the line of scrimmage. Like, but when you're going to give him an hour to release the ball, and when you're going to give Isaiah Bond the opportunity to get open, it's going to work out, and it did. And if Auburn had half a brain, they would have been able to avoid it.
Auburn choked like the Vikings did tonight.
Yeah, I don't know how you lose to the Bears, but the Bears and the Giants are now somehow 2 games out of an NFC playoff spot right now, and we'll get into that later if we have time. I do want to lead into the college football playoff rankings in general and just this upcoming weekend. So obviously we'll go through and give our predictions for the Power 5, and then I'm sure Davian's going to have a prediction that he's going to want to make outside of the Power 5. If you are a true follower, you'll know exactly who we're talking about. But hint, hint, it's maybe Tulane, possibly Tulane. But let's talk about some of the scenarios right now, because I think Michigan beating Ohio State, that puts Michigan firmly in unless they get blown out by Iowa, which, let's be honest here. Sorry, Theodore, but Iowa is not putting up more than like 10 points in this game. And if they manage to put up 17, they're not going to hold Michigan to less than that. Yeah. I'm willing to make that comment knowing that it's in all likelihood not going to come back and bite me in the bum. You can make the argument that Washington-Oregon is also a win-and-in game, but Washington, as a one loss, you lose to the Pac-12 champion in Oregon. You beat them earlier in the year. That creates some chaos. Texas, you got to win. Need a little help as well. Florida State, I think we all can agree, likely is going to wind up in the college football playoff to all of ours dismay. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think any of us are really excited to watch Florida
Yeah.
State in the college football playoff, especially with Jordan Travis being out for the year and just a terrible
It's
injury,
just
which was
not
so sad to
fun.
see. And that kind of is the breakdown. And then obviously Theodore, as he knows very well, the marquee matchup of the entire weekend, Georgia versus Alabama, which is a win and in for Alabama. Georgia, if they lose, some work might need to be done. Boys, how do you guys see this upcoming weekend play out, and who do you think is ranked where when the dust all settles?
Yeah. All right. So I've been liking how Oregon's been playing. I think Oregon wins. Oregon wins. They're in. Michigan, they win. They're in. I don't think there's much to discuss with Michigan. I think just playing Iowa, a team that's just not been playing well whatsoever. I mean, you look at the money line; they're minus 23-point favorites. I mean, I think that speaks well in itself. I do have Bama winning, which I think we'll discuss more. And I do have Louisville winning. Look, this Florida State team almost lost to, the Gators. Like, yes, that game was very intense. It being a rivalry game, a lot of emotion, I guess you could say. Being down in the swamp where FSU rarely wins, I still think that they didn't play that well. And I think Louisville, like, yes, they're not the greatest team out there. I still think that really, I think that they beat FSU and play spoiler. And then I have Texas beating Oklahoma State, and that's a big game in itself because Texas wins, FSU loses. Is Texas in?
That's a big thing too, because if you think about it, if Alabama beats Georgia, then you get into that argument. Well, Alabama is SEC champion, likely 1 or 2 seed. Then Texas, they beat Alabama. Their only loss was to Oklahoma earlier on in the year. So obviously that's a big question. I think something important to note before I throw it over to Theodore is the fact that Oregon, every single week throughout the season, has scored more than 30 points. They have yet to have a game where they've scored less than 30 points. They had 33 versus Washington, could have been 36, but they missed a last second field goal, which allowed Washington to win. Yes, their schedule, like USC, is kind of fallen off a little bit. Utah's fallen off a little bit as the season's gone on. Oregon State is still a solid team, but probably are going to wind up in the top 20, 15 to 20 range. And then you have Colorado, who's completely fallen off the face of the earth, which it feels like everyone suddenly forgot about once they started being bad again. But that I'm not going to rip on Coach Prime and kick him while he's down. Anywho, though, this Oregon team, I had Washington for a while, but with all these close wins for Washington, and especially this past weekend versus Washington State, again, as we've discussed before numerous times, rivalry weekend brings out a lot of emotions. It's a close game regardless, but I've been leaning more and more towards Oregon winning this game versus Washington this coming Friday. But Theodore, your thoughts on the weekend and where do you think the rankings are going to settle?
Okay, so I'm gonna start this out here. The committee claims they have three main metrics for grading teams, right? You got head-to-head matchups, you got strength of schedule, and then you have the most absurd one of them all, the eye test. The eye test is the dumbest argument on how to judge a team. For example, you look at Oregon, they win the eye test because, yeah, they score all these points and, oh, their quarterback looks so good and all that. They have the 65th ranked strength of schedule in the country. They have not played as many good teams. Like, you brought up the top of their map, the top opponents for them, Raffi, and it's really not that impressive. I'm sorry. And you look at how many just outright bad teams they've had the ability to play this year. I'm not impressed. Now, look, you got to acknowledge the fact that they were a missed 40-yard field goal away from being in Washington shoes right now. And yeah, it sucks that they couldn't make that kick. But Oregon, to me, should very clearly be the team left out if it comes to it. And I'm going to tell you how I think this weekend is going to play out. First of all, I really think that this Florida State team is going to be able to defeat Louisville.
No, but continue.
The thing is, look, Louisville they're not that good. I'm sorry.
I agree.
So,
Louisville, sorry to jump right in, but Louisville might have been going into this weekend one of the worst 10-win teams that I've seen in
yeah,
a while.
exactly.
Like
They
they were
lost
just like
the pick.
they're in the top 10, but it's like you're just it's like it's kind of like Notre Dame. It's like even Notre
Uh-huh.
Dame's kind of better than them for most years, honestly, as much as I hate Notre Dame. But like Louisville is just like you're kind of just here because of your record. You're not really here because you've won a bunch of great games or anything like that. But
They
They've
continue,
had some
Theodore.
big wins though.
Not really.
There's a reason why they're ranked.
They're just not that good. I'm
Well,
sorry.
see, the thing is though, when you see a Power 5 team that's a one-loss team, you're gonna put them high up in the rankings
Oh, yeah.
regardless because they're a Power 5 team. And yes, Davian, you're absolutely like they have some wins. Like they beat Duke earlier on in the year in a commanding
They
fashion.
beat Notre Dame.
They beat Notre Dame, obviously, as Davian and I recall very well because we
Yeah.
are certified Notre Dame haters. But aside from that, the rest of your schedule hasn't been anything like too crazy. Like, okay, you
Right.
beat Virginia and Miami by a touchdown. Kentucky has been hovering around being in the rankings, being out of the rankings. They lost to them just this past weekend by a touchdown. Losing to Pitt though was the big like
That was brutal.
exclamation point. Like,
That's when you
are they?
realize.
That's where you get that like the poster where it's like, is this team a fraud? And it has like a phone call and it's from Louisville. Like potential fraud Louisville right there. And again, they haven't been bad this year. And I'm not trying to discount their record because obviously you got to win whoever you're playing. There's nothing that Louisville could have done here. I mean, you saw what happened with Auburn when they tried paying a bunch of money to play a team, and we all saw how that game went. But I just think that Louisville, for as good as their record is, I don't think it's indicative of how good of a team they actually are. So
Yeah.
I do agree with you, Theodore. I really do think that Florida State is going to wind up winning this game. And to all our dismay and to all of our disgust, we're likely going to see Florida State in the college football playoff. But continue on with what you're saying.
Yeah, and look, credit where credit's due. Louisville, this is their best year since the Lamar Jackson era. Like they are having an impressive season, and they could very well go out and win the game. I just don't think they will. I think that Tate Rodemaker has really been solid. He's obviously not Jordan Travis, but he's capable. And I think, unfortunately, because I don't really want to see Florida State in the college football playoff, I think it'd be the worst of the four to get in. But I think we'll see Florida State in. I think that, let me say this about Iowa. If I was a betting man, which I'm not, I am, by the way, not allowed as part of my contract with SEC Network, not allowed to bet on any sports that are affiliated with the NCAA at all at the college level or at the pro level. So I can bet on NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, anything. So if I was a betting man, though, Iowa minus 23 or Iowa plus 23 and a half. Come on. Are they really going to get blown out by that much? I don't know.
Yes.
No. We saw
They're going to lose in proper Big Ten championship fashion, and it's going to be like 30-10 or something like that. But it's going to be enough to cover.
On. This Iowa team stinks. Their defense is good. Don't get me wrong. This team stinks.
This is a team that's gone through so much adversity this year, so many injuries, but they are so well coached, and they've been rallying. And you look at what they did against a capable Rutgers team with a great defense. They scored 22 points. I know I shouldn't be saying that.
Capable Rutgers team? I'm sorry. I'm the biggest Rutgers fan.
Rutgers had a top 10.
What are you saying?
Going into that matchup. Rutgers had a top 10 defense going into that matchup. You know? Look,
going into it, yes. And then they let 45 points up to Maryland, bro.
They're a team that finds a way to win. And will they find a way to win against Michigan? No, probably not. I'd love it if they did, but they won't. But I think that's going to keep close. My point being, though, Michigan and Florida State have two of the spots locked down. That leaves two spots for Washington if they win, or Oregon, then Texas, then Alabama. Because, look, Alabama will beat Georgia. I'm telling you this right now. We have not come this far just to lose. We have not come this far just to lose now. You know, people say we had a weak performance against Auburn. Yeah, it's the Jordan Hare voodoo. Like, we always have a tough performance there.
Roll Tide.
The thing is, it's going to be a tough call. The way I would do it, I would give the two spots. Well, first of all, Washington gets a spot if they win. They're a 13-0 team. They easily get a spot. If Washington loses,
Oregon gets a spot.
my two final spots go to Texas and go to Alabama. Those are two
I think
teams
that's fair.
with top 10 strength of schedules. And quite frankly, Texas going into Bryant-Denny and beating Alabama is probably the biggest win by any team all season. I don't think it's a stretch to say that. I honestly just think that Texas, yeah, they don't pass the eye test. Neither does Florida State. Really, neither does Alabama to an extent. The eye test is bullshit. I'm sorry. Like, I like Bo Nix. I like this Oregon team. They're a good. They honestly are a good team. But I just don't see why they're more deserving of a spot just because they beat a bunch of inferior opponents by more points.
Yeah,
Well,
but
you
if
can make the
Oregon
argument
beats
too, though,
Washington,
with
I think
Texas.
that's it. I think that's what punches in their ticket. I think Oregon beating Washington, right? Coming full circle this entire season, right? Their only losses against Washington. If they blow out Washington, right?
Yeah.
I think they deserve a spot. I don't see how you argue against Oregon not having a spot.
Okay.
See, but Oregon would have to blow out Washington. That's like
Yes,
the key
if they
point.
agree.
blow out
Yeah.
Washington,
They would
I
have to
don't see
blow
how
out-
Texas can
Right.
have a spot over them. I also continue to say this. I don't think, even with FSU, look, we talk about like the reason why Oregon can't get in. Why should FSU get in?
They're
Who
undefeated.
did they beat? They
ACC
beat LSU. They own. Okay, look, they beat LSU, right? They beat Clemson, but a Clemson team that stinks. They beat a Miami team, which is not that good. They barely beat a Florida team, which is just not that good. They beat a Duke team, which was good, but is no longer really not that good. And then you look at the rest of their schedule, like, what is there to say? They were able to etch out a win against Boston College of all teams. The
Okay.
fact that they remain in the top four after only beating Boston College by 2 is just shocking to me. Now I understand, but I completely understand that if FSU beats Louisville, they deserve it because they're undefeated. By that premise alone, I completely understand that. But if we're going to say the reason why Oregon shouldn't get in, if we're going to argue that Oregon shouldn't get in after beating Washington, I don't see how you can argue for FSU to have a spot over Oregon based on the same logic.
Okay. I think, in a way, I agree with what you're saying, Davian. I just think that if you're the committee and you've had, you've built up certain precedents over your 8 years, and one of those precedents is that if you're an undefeated Power 5 team, I mean, you're in. Like, there's no question about it. I don't know, because do I believe that Oregon's a better team than FSU? Yeah. I believe Oregon's a better team than Michigan. I think that this Oregon team is a legit title contender and a top 3 team in the country. But at the same time, in your rationale, a one-loss Georgia who loses a close game to Bama should be in. Ohio State, who almost went and beat Michigan down the stretch, should be in over FSU. A one-loss Washington, assuming it's a close game versus Oregon, should be in. Like, there are just so many
Right. No, I understand what you're
close
saying.
calls,
Yeah.
and that's honestly. And look, I hate to trash on Florida State this much because they really are. I mean, they're not a bad team.
I don't know.
But
When I watched them, I did not
I
like
will
that.
say I am rooting for them to lose to Louisville just because there are a lot of teams that I would rather see play in this college football playoff.
I think rather see, and also I personally think more deserve it. You beat a Clemson team that sucks in overtime, and barely beat them there, and then you look at the rest of their schedule and there isn't much.
Let me ask you guys this, and I'm gonna give my answer first. If we're talking about what 4 teams are playing the best football right now, I'm gonna give you Alabama. I'm gonna give you Georgia. I'm gonna give you Michigan, and I'm gonna give you probably the winner of Washington, Oregon. Now, will that be those 4 teams will not be the college football playoff? but I think there's an argument that like those are the teams that are playing the best right now, and there
Yeah.
really are just so many tough decisions for the committee to make. And quite frankly, we haven't even talked about the biggest debate the committee has, because it is clear there's one thing that stands above the rest when it comes to decisions. Texas went into Brian Denny and beat Alabama. Alabama's clearly playing better football right now. How do you deal with that mess if they both win and they're both fighting for one spot?
So, like, the
Yeah.
question is, right, if Bama beats Georgia, does Bama even get in?
In my
Bama,
eyes,
Because the question
I
is
think
that, like, will Texas beat Bama? And because of that premise alone,
Right.
because
If-
because we've noticed that the college, sorry, Raffi, to cut you off, but
yeah, it's
we've
okay.
noticed the college football playoffs have been like, the committee has been really focusing on these head matchups. So, and Raffi, we've kind of discussed this like on the TikTok lives, which definitely check those out. We're gonna be streaming on Tuesday, every Tuesday. Well, or whatever, whenever it's gonna be. I think it's a question that you could ask. Raffi, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Alabama, if they beat Georgia, you have to give them a spot. You're being the number one team in the country, even if it's a close game. It's a neutral site. You can make the argument that's even more of a home game
it
too,
is a
with the
Georgia
fact
Bowl
that's in
game. The
Atlanta.
city's bench is going to be packed in orange.
But still, you get it's a neutral site
Correct.
game. Alabama beating Georgia puts Alabama in the playoff 100%. Now, I think this is a scenario where Florida State, as an undefeated Power 5 team, could get bounced because if Michigan takes care of Iowa, Michigan's in. I think we all can agree on that. They have wins versus Penn State. They beat Ohio State. 2 really good wins. They have a better stuff than Florida State does over them. I think where things get interesting is if Oregon beats Washington, because then, as we were saying earlier, you get into that mess of, well, Washington beat Oregon earlier in the year. Oregon just beat Washington. Both are one-loss teams. Oregon has that Pac-12 championship, but then you get Texas and Alabama, both at one losses. So I think for sure you have Michigan. You'd have Alabama. You have Texas. And then you get into your argument. Okay, so Georgia just lost one game. They just lost to Alabama, who arguably won't be the number one team, but like let's be honest, like under the radar, they really should be the number one team if they do beat Georgia. I'd say I agree with you. If they beat Georgia, I think they're better than they should be ranked higher than Michigan and Washington and Florida State, regardless.
Yeah.
So regardless, though, Michigan, let's say Washington takes care of business, you put Washington at 2, and then I think you got to just put Alabama, Texas, and just say, I'm sorry, Florida State, but this is what, because let's be honest too, you want money. Everyone wants money. Having Florida State in the college football playoff is not, like, you can make the argument, like, we saw this with Washington like 7 years ago. We saw this with Michigan State. You put them in as a 4 seed, they get absolutely just slaughtered. No one wants to see that. We see it every year with Notre Dame, basically. If Florida State goes into the college football playoff, I think they're gonna just get smacked, and that's not. No one wants to see that. No one's gonna want to see that. So, in theory, you'd want Alabama. Your 4 teams in general, not ranking them. Alabama, Texas. You'd want Alabama, Texas, winner of Washington, Oregon, and then Michigan as well. And if I didn't say Michigan, then Georgia too. You can make the argument. And before I hand it over to you, Theodore, I think it needs to be mentioned because you guys have been pumping Alabama's tires. Alabama's been playing well. Obviously, we can just discard the Auburn game as a rivalry game. Came out at the end. I've seen it before where they've done this versus Auburn. I'm not going to doubt Nick Saban or Alabama. I'm not going to call them frauds. Not going to down them because I have gone down that road too many times, and every single time it has not gone well for me. Georgia, whenever they play a highly ranked team or a highly anticipated matchup, when they went at home versus Ole Miss, when they were playing at home versus Mizzou, when they're at Tennessee, they have stepped up to the occasion and have won.
Yes.
Basically, like Mizzou, they beat by 9, but that entire game was essentially Georgia just rolling Mizzou. That game was much closer. The score is much closer than what actually happened in that game. When Georgia plays high-ranked teams or teams that they must win or teams up to their or close to their caliber, they show up. And that's something where I think it's highly likely that we see Georgia beat Alabama this weekend. And I know that's not ideal for you both. I know you guys both want Alabama to win. I want Alabama to win for the chaos, But I've just seen this Georgia team where we've discussed this entire season where we see them, okay, they barely beat Auburn. Oh, well, they allowed 21 points to UAB. They barely beat South Carolina. But then you see them just smack Mizzou, smack Ole Miss, smack Tennessee. I think it's fair to doubt them, but I personally, after what they've shown me versus high-ranked teams, I don't think it's fair to count them out right now.
Let me say this,
I almost
Raffi.
count them out. I just think Bama wins.
The thing is, Bama and Georgia all year have both been teams that have played to the level of their competition. I mean, we saw Bama
absolutely.
slack in the second half and only beat Arkansas by 3 points. Like that's a game we should have blown
USF.
out. Right. USF was because we had Tyler Buckner. Like,
well, USF was a hiccup. All right, it was a hiccup.
Yeah, right. That was so different, really. But Georgia the same way. I mean, Georgia struggled against Vanderbilt. Like people forget that. Like they only beat them by 10. You know.
Right.
They only beat like Georgia Tech by like what?
Yeah, right. Like my point is, like these are two teams that show up for the big matchups. I really would be surprised if this game is a blowout either way. I think it'll be close. I'm so excited for that. Let me throw one more thing out there on the topic of Florida State. We have seen teams go out there and win with backup quarterbacks. How about 2015 Ohio State? Everyone's doubting them. People wanted TCU in the playoff over them. I mean, and then third string Cardale Jones goes in there and wins a national championship, beats Marcus Mariota. Like, you got to remember that.
I'm shocked you didn't mention Tua.
Well, Tua was a halftime substitution, yeah.
But still, you can make the argument. But yes, but I get
what you're saying.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, like, I don't know. Florida State's giving me a lot to think about. Let me just say this. Let me say, if Bama does not make the playoff as a one-loss SEC champ, is the biggest scam in the history of the college football playoff. But let me also say this. If Bama and Texas are both one-loss conference champions, it's just hard for me, even as the biggest Bama homer out there, it's hard for me to justify Bama being above Texas. And here's why. Every year, we love watching these big-time non-conference games. We love it when teams schedule them. And they really are. Like, for example, early in the year, it obviously doesn't mean as much now, but like that Ohio State-Notre Dame game, you know? When Ohio State played Oregon, I think it was 2 years ago, like, we always get one or two of these crazy matchups in the beginning of the year. And they always mean so much to us as fans. If Bama is ranked above Texas, it opens up a whole can of worms that I don't know if the committee wants to open. Because if Bama beats Texas, the committee's basically flipping Texas off, like saying, screw you guys shouldn't have even scheduled this game. I just think that head-to-head matchups need to hold value, because if they don't, why are teams going to keep scheduling them?
Well, I mean, they won't be able to, I don't think, really anymore. They won't have a big need anymore with the conference realignment coming up. Like,
for example, like, we could always still see, like, we can see Oregon come into Tuscaloosa and do, like, a home-and-home series. Like, and especially with how much teams are traveling now for conference games, they'll be willing to do just as much traveling for non-conference games. Really, the possibilities on matchups that we can get in the non-conference, especially with the 12-team playoff coming, are endless. But I really think that there needs to be an emphasis put on winning head-to-head matchups.
There needs to be,
Teams need to have a reason for scheduling these games, otherwise they'll stop doing it. And that's not what we want to see.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And before we close, I just want to throw this out there, and this would spark another half-hour discussion. Unfortunately, we don't have the time, although we're definitely going to be talking about this leading up and then after the college football playoff rankings are released. I just quickly want to gauge your guys' opinion on this. So 12-team playoff hypothetically. Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Penn State, Mizzou. Those 4 teams. Do you guys think they have any chance at winning versus the current teams that they play against being Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Alabama?
Yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
think any of those teams have a chance.
I
Well,
don't
okay.
think so either. I just don't. I don't think those teams are just gonna be able to beat Oregon or any of those teams.
I mean,
No.
Ole Miss literally almost went into Tuscaloosa and like they competed with Bama, you know?
I just don't see it.
Yeah.
I really do think that the right decision would have been to have a 16 college football playoff. It
I
rewards the
agree.
top 2 teams with a bye, and you would still get like right now. You can make the argument that there's 8 teams that have a really good argument to be in the college football playoff right now. Anyone else outside of that, and I
I
don't really
think
think that.
I
Raffi,
kind of like the idea of 12-team. I think they need to try it because I think it could be really fun next year.
here's the problem with the 12 team. The 12 team was great in theory 3 years ago because it was going to make conferences matter again.
Yeah.
Like the fact that the Pac 12 champion was going to be guaranteed a bid, you know? Whereas so many years, like the Pac 12 champ would be a 2 or 3 loss team, would cannibalize each other. The fact that, you know, what was the year where Northwestern won the Big Ten? Was that 2020?
I think so, somewhere
Like
around
the
there.
fact that they would have been in the playoff. Like as a multi-loss team, like they would have had the ability to go out, win the Big Ten West, and you know, shock the world and be a playoff team. Like it really was such a great idea. But now that we are first of all down to less conferences, and second of all, really in a world where conferences mean so much less, like I think the 12-team playoff has just lost a lot of its appeal.
Yeah.
And look, I'm going to be honest. I am critical. Like, I do not like conference realignment.
Yeah. I think we all are supportive of
Yeah,
conference.
I mean, most people are just, why do they do this? Like, I don't know.
It's just
See, because it was already screwed up enough region-wise, where like I already was like, why are some of these teams even in the conferences that they're in? Obviously, we all know the same old Raffi boomer, like, why is Notre Dame not in a conference? Yada yada yada. They should be in the Big Ten. They're in it for hockey. They're in the ACC for basketball. This is ridiculous. I'm gonna cut the story short here, but like you guys get the point. But even like you lose the nature of like having teams play against each other that are all in the same region. Like
Look,
the Big Ten, I love the Big Ten commercial, but I'm not gonna lie. Every time I see it, I get annoyed because just before we include the Big Ten team or the Pac-12 schools that are coming in, it's like, okay, here's the Big Ten and Penn State and Rutgers
no,
and
okay.
Maryland. It's like you
I
guys are
think
just too far out from
I
like
agree.
I like the region specific stuff, honestly. And you
I
can call me like you can call me whatever you want. I don't care, but like I think we're losing that region like thing that we've had over the past years, and
let me
that's
throw
kind of the big thing I'm upset about.
let me throw one more thing out there. So I'm in the airport, right? And this was, you know, getting home a couple about about a week ago now. And I'm in the airport and I see like a fan or like basically just a grown man, you know, sitting wearing a Mississippi State shirt. And I go up to talk to him because, you know, SEC represent could have like talk a little smack to him about Bama and about just how bad, you know, state was. And we had a little time, so we had like a longer conversation and he he seemed sad. And the reason was we are losing the battle of I-82. You know, Alabama and Mississippi State have played each other, or at least Alabama's played Mississippi State more times than any other team in, you know, history. Um, and he was telling me he is married to an Alabama graduate, and you know they're raising kids now, and it's just such a fun thing. He said, like in their family, in their friend groups, all that, where people live, breathe, sleep SEC football, and this matchup is played every year, and it means so much to these people. The schools are literally 75-minute drive apart, and now they're never going to play again on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Right, and then you see the same with like Oklahoma State versus Oklahoma. Like we're losing that rivalry as well. We're losing Washington versus Washington State.
Well, that
Oregon
one's
versus
been
Oregon
renewed,
State.
thankfully.
What?
Those have thankfully been renewed.
Oh, okay, that's good at least. But like my point still was that
I'm just
they still had to be renewed or some like etc. So the fact that we're losing at least some very, very good, like very great rivalries that have been going on for over like some of these are over 100 years.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're losing them and there's not like really an attempt to keep them in place is just very disappointing. We can talk more about this next week once the college football playoff rankings are out, and then we can watch if Alabama wins and doesn't get ranked. We can watch Theodore pull his hair out. Regardless, he's definitely going to do it because he has to keep watching Giants football. Davian, he's going to be pulling out his hair from the Patriots. I cannot watch the Falcons for another game. This team is just crazy, but it is what it is. We'll talk about college football playoff rankings, and we will make sure to talk about the NFL. Hopefully, at some extent.
Raffi,
Davian has something before I
We didn't talk about the biggest game of this weekend. Tulane versus SMU. Look.
Oh, of course.
Tulane is gonna whoop SMU's butt. They're gonna win the AAC championship, man. You gave us the combo last year. Give us the Rose Bowl this year. I don't even care.
Davian almost had an Oregon moment right there. Oregon was gonna win the Big 12 and the Pac-12, and now we're gonna have Tulane win not only the AAC but also the ACC on top of it too.
Exactly. Look,
they probably could.
All I'm saying is this Tulane team is insane. All right, QB goes down, he comes back, and they go 11-1. This team is it. Also, shout out to JMU. They are going bowling, and I'm so hyped for that. I am so hyped. So many other teams are going bowling that don't really deserve to be going bowling. But you know, a bowl game is a bowl game. Either way, it shall be fun. Rutgers will be again playing in the Pinstripe Bowl as per usual, which is sad. Yeah, they'll probably.
As a bowler myself, I'm very excited about that. Davian, I appreciate you keeping me honest and modest at all times and making sure you got in your point about Tulane. That'll do it for this edition. We hope you enjoyed this a little longer, but still a great conversation about college football. So be sure to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Be sure to like this video. Follow us on TikTok, Benchwarmer_sports. We're trying to hit 2,000 followers before the end of the year. We'd love to hit that goal. So you following helps us hit that goal. I hope you have a great week. I hope you enjoy Conference Championship weekend this upcoming Saturday and have a great rest of your day. See ya.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.